5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I farted.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely.
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the 149th episode of Rank and Review. This episode, returning guests Scott Lehman and your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons are going to discuss torture porn. This is the second time that Rank and Review has discussed the subject. The first time, interestingly, was episode 9, and the second time, episode 149. Curiously, episode 9 was followed by an episode called Homicide Made Hilarious, and episode 150 is going to be called Homicide Made Hilarious too. It seems history is strangely repeating itself in this podcast. But I guess it goes without saying that this is going to be a tough bunch of movies. And as usual, you can expect spoilers, you can expect coarse language, and you can expect some pretty graphic discussion of some pretty graphic films. I get it if this is not your cup of tea because, well, frankly, it's not usually my cup of tea. So I'm going to go allow my buttons to be pushed. I hope you enjoy it. If you enjoy Rank and Review, I think you'll probably enjoy the Terror Table podcast, so consider giving the Terror Table podcast some of your time. And thank you so much for listening to Rank and Review. Send me some feedback at ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. And check out my website at ranknreview.ca because I am Canadian. And it's a nice site. You can check out some previous episodes and spread the word on Rank and Review. Let's talk torture porn, kids. Thank you so much, Scott. It's great to see you, even though we're not like for reals in person right now. We're getting to do another Rank and Review, which is always an occasion for me, as far as I'm concerned.
Happy to do it again. It's always fun.
And look at us using our technology to our benefit here. I'm talking to Scott from far off romantic Edmonton, Alberta, and we're doing this high-tech podcast for the first time, so everyone hopefully will bear with us. But we're going to talk about torture porn, as it has been so dubbed. This is the second episode ever that's been dedicated to it. And as I said the first time we did it, this might be my least favorite genre of horror.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're on the same page with me there, but I usually like a horror movie that have a percentage of fun to it. And a lot of these movies... There's a lot of descriptors we could use, but I don't know if fun would be the one that I would go to.
That's fair to say.
So what is it? What is the itch being scratched? What is the beast that's being fed when we watch movies like this? Why torture porn, brother?
I think it's the name torture porn that really turns people off of it.
It's a dare almost.
Because there's stigma attached to saying, hey, I'm going to go watch a torture porn movie. You sound like a horrible person right off the bat, right? I know Sarah said, my wife, I was watching one of these movies, and she said, what are you watching? I can't remember which one it was. And she said, oh, what kind of movie is that? And I said, oh, it's torture porn. And she didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. It's like, I'm a bad person. Why are you watching that? I don't know. I really hate the phrase torture porn. I understand it, I guess. I tried to look it up, where the phrase came from. and I guess it was a film critic, David Edelstein,
Who started this whole ball rolling?
and he used it in, I think, 2006 to describe films like Hostel, Saw, The Devil's Rejects, Wolf Creek, kind of defined by seeing people suffering slow, agonizing, torturous deaths, and that being the primary point of the work.
That's right. I mean, I've watched and reviewed a lot of movies where people die brutal deaths, but usually there's an overarching story beyond that.
Right.
A lot of these movies seem to be just giving people the sex and violence and the ugliest corners of the sex and violence, and that's the product a lot of the time.
And there's not always the sex involved in that. I mean, sex is involved in a lot of horror movies.
Yes, absolutely.
And the phrase torture porn, it sort of implies that the viewer is perhaps getting off on it a little bit.
Right.
And I think that's, maybe not sexually, but maybe a little bit sexually.
Right.
It depends on the viewer. Or maybe sometimes I'm concerned, one of these in particular, you wonder if the filmmakers even maybe enjoying it too much.
Exactly.
But I think some movies that get called torture porn are maybe unfairly brushed aside. They're saying I won't watch that because it's a torture porn movie because I've heard that it was. Sometimes I wonder what makes certain films different. What's a torture porn? What's a slasher film? Why is Slumber Party Massacre a slasher film and then Wolf Creek is a torture porn?
I think it's just the amount of intense fear and suffering shown on screen. A lot of the time with these slasher movies, traditionally, there'll be a quick sort of, oh no, and then like the knife goes into the face and it's over, right?
Yeah.
The torture porn movies aren't about that. The torture porn, like, the centerpiece, what would call like an action centerpiece in a Marvel movie, is basically some chick strapped to a table dying an awful and slow death, right?
Sure.
So, and I understand people getting, finding that distasteful. Like I say, for me, it's just that I find them not fun. I don't mind, a movie being difficult or having some harsh subject matter, but it's going to hurt the repeat viewings of the movie if I feel awful after I watch it, right?
Yeah, I get it.
So, and that's a lot of the time what I feel, either awful for myself for making the decision to watch the movie, or just awful because the subject matter of the movie is so extreme. And I know you're not inured to this. I seem to remember, I hope it was you, having a conversation with somebody about Martyrs, and you felt like the need to like destroy the actual physical copy of the movie so that it was never watched by you or anyone again.
Well, I didn't actually do that.
Oh, you thought about doing it.
I had that feeling. I've watched this once, and I can't see a time where I need to watch that again.
Yeah.
I actually sold it and then rebought it actually at one point. I thought, you know what, there's maybe more to this movie.
It had an effect on you.
But I think it's the period of like 20, 25 minutes straight of a woman being punched and slapped where it got too much. And there's no enjoyment in that.
And we're going to bump into that a little bit this week, I think, on the show.
Well, I mean, to kind of stay on just the general discussion on the topic, there are some films that are, no doubt, simply torture porn, where it's the torture and there's nothing else to it.
Yeah.
Have you seen or heard of, I'm sure, the American Guinea Pig films?
I guess not.
Okay, I believe they're Japanese.
Okay.
Extreme films. I think there's one I've seen a bit. It's called The Devil's Experiment, if I'm not mistaken, where that's all it is. It's a gang of people. They abduct a woman and they torture her, and that is the film.
Yeah.
And there's no plot. It's only to see suffering, and I found it very pointless. Not even hard to watch maybe a bit hard to watch, but it was more like why would I watch this kind of thing that really bothered me. It's just plotless, prolonged torture of a woman, and there's no redeeming factor at all.
Right.
No entertainment other than. But there are some films with torture that do have some redeeming, something further to offer horror fans. And I think torture can be used effectively as a fear tactic. As you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we've talked about that one before, and I'm a big fan of that.
It's the gold standard for you.
That might be, it's a slasher film, but it could partially be considered torture as well. The whole final half hour of that film is just madness and torture. And there's a couple films in this 6 that we're going to talk about today that do have clear Texas Chainsaw Massacre influences.
Oh, absolutely.
is there a certain point that, with that film specifically, why that one doesn't really get in this conversation, or?
I think, like, we talked about it when we reviewed it, like, it's got this reputation for being super gory, but if you break it down, you don't actually see a lot of violence on screen in Texas
Right.
Chainsaw Massacre.
And the more
It's the
disturbing
ordeal.
aspects,
It's
I think the more...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's the ordeal that the characters are put through, the constant manic, like, oh my fucking god. And they sort of leave you there for as long as they can in that place. So you get the feeling of the torture porn without the meat and potatoes of the torture porn.
And I think the torturous part of that film is probably the more horrifying part.
Right.
But, I mean, there's a couple other that popped in my head here. For those of you that can't see me, which I guess is everybody, I actually have my Fright Rags Stranger shirt on.
Nice.
Of a more recent film that maybe it's not quite torture porn, but I think it kind of goes into that category a bit because there's not the straight killing. They fuck with the people for 90 minutes and then they kill them. Vacancy is another film sort of like that, where they kind of drag it out. Going back in time, you talk about Martyrs.
Yeah.
Last House on the Left, I think. Cannibal Holocaust. The Hills Have Eyes, would that qualify a bit?
That's really close. That's definitely a horror movie that's skirting the line of torture porn for me because of the rape and like the whole how personal things get.
Yeah.
In those movies. I
mean, these are films that they do sort of qualify, but they're not in that pile of torture porn. But they very easily could be. So I think if someone's just going to brush it off and say, I'm not going to watch a horror film that's called that, I think you might be missing some, if you're a horror fan.
Right.
These are only for horror fans, mind you. It's not for someone to test, dip their foot in the horror water and see if they like that.
This should be nobody's first horror movie. None of these movies should be your first horror movie. I also just wanted to talk quickly about the sort of forbidden nature of the genre, like of horror genre. Basically, I think a large part of the appeal of the entire genre is that you get to see stuff that you're not supposed to see. Especially in that sort of tipping point age around puberty for boys where, everything is forbidden to us. So, like, being able to see this stuff is like the suddenly exciting big deal. But I do think that I'm glad that I discovered these movies later on. I'm as weird and dark as they are, I'm glad that I buddied up with, like, the Evil Dead franchise and Friday the 13th instead of I Spit on Your Grave and Last House on the Left. Because, yeah, they're just inherently not fun. They are viscerally disturbing. I respect that people want to be disturbed and like getting that feeling and like the safe scare. It's artificial. We all know that this is pretend and make-believe. Let's be adults about this. So if that's your cup of tea, then fine. That's fine. Typically, I like to have more fun. But we'll get into it. Is there anything you wanted to say else by way of introduction before we talk about these 6 torture porn movies?
Unless we can think of a new name to call them, but
torture movies it's the porn that really gives it the negative connotation more than the torture. Isn't that weird?
That somebody's watching I Spit on My Grave with one hand on the remote and one hand under the table, and it's just so ugly. But go ahead.
Yeah, the 6 movies that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about I Spit on Your Grave. We're going to talk about Saw 2, CALVAIRE, or The Ordeal as it is known, HOSTEL Part 2, Wolf Creek, and we're going to finish with another French extreme movie called Frontiers. Thanks so much for being here, brother.
Right on.
I'll make you feel like you've never felt before.
God bless your hands.
Wait till you feel this.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic.
No, not
I spit on your grave.
Scared you, didn't I?
What do you want?
It's you I want.
Okay, I find it really weird that there's a franchise that has been made out of I Spit on Your Grave. It's been remade, and then that remake has had 2 sequels and a prequel now.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Well, the prequel, is that the recent one you're talking about?
yeah, I haven't seen it. I just know that it exists. I shouldn't
That's
speak for it.
because I think you're talking about the direct sequel to this one,
Okay.
to the original. That's the one where it's 2.5 hours long.
I don't know. I have not watched it.
No.
The thing about I Spit on Your Grave, which a lot of the times works for a horror movie, is its blunt simplicity. A attractive young writer wants to have a little sort of personal vacation time to read and get inspired and do some work. And she is fucking brutalized by a bunch of guys, repeatedly raped, beaten, and humiliated by these fuckers, and basically spends the rest of the movie hunting them down and wreaking horrible vengeance upon them. And that is it.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally called Day of the Woman. It's sort of, I guess, like the director had this high-minded idea that it might be sort of some sort of feminist death wish type of thing, but in the end of the day, I think what this movie is about is watching this woman first be tormented and then celebrate the violence of her vengeance. And it appeals to every kind of dark corner of the psyche of the horror audience, and to me in a way that doesn't make me feel good for having watched the movie.
No, there's not a lot of fun to be had with this one.
Zero fun. And I mean, the subject doesn't call for any fun. I mean, I would be more upset with the movie if it did like the Last House on the Left, where there or what was that? The Town That Dreaded Sundown, where all of a sudden they had these weird comic moments that they threw in the movie for no reason at all. I think they thought they were breaking the tension, but all they were doing is just being disrespectful for what had proceeded. I think that there's some interesting choices, like the fact that there's almost no score to the movie. Kind of adds to a weird, calm, disturbing element. Like, it does feel like you're just lakeside somehow witnessing this horrible shit because that artifice is stripped away. And this sounds weird to say out loud, but I'll say it. Just the sheer amount of screen time that our main character is stark naked in the movie kind of wears away at you. Like, it takes the power away from it after a point and becomes... I repeatedly sort of had this scowl on my face and was asking myself, what am I watching? What am I watching? What am I watching? And so at the end of the day, no, I did not have fun with this, and I don't know who I would recommend it to.
Well, you can't see it, but I've been nodding.
Yes.
Much. I'm nodding in agreement to everything you're saying. Getting back to you said there's no score really to the film.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. That sort of adds to the realism, I guess, and maybe the uncomfortableness of it, where maybe you might feel like it's not a movie, you're just lakeside watching this. And it's really ugly. The thing is, I wonder if there's much to, if we're going to say much about it, because there's really not much to say. Well, there's stuff to say, but there's not much to the actual movie itself. I mean, you're right. It's four guys, right?
4 guys in total, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they're all shitty men, and they just attack this woman unprovoked, completely unprovoked, and they drag her through the woods, beat her, rape her, chase her through the woods, sodomize her, rape her again, follow her home where she's beaten again, and then raped with a bottle, and
it goes
and then left for dead.
And
this takes up half of the movie.
Yeah.
Where there's no break in between, and you're right, she's naked the entire time, and it's not pretty naked. It's dirty, bruised, bloody, and the director lingers. He lingers on those long shots of her just crawling away naked, and it's not. In his credit, it's not sexual at all. Where I don't think you could say they're glorifying the rape.
No,
but
not at all.
They're still. You know?
But it does go on, and it is the only reason that the movie exists. Now, apparently he and this actress were falling in love at the time. They ended up getting married. There was obviously a lot of trust between the two of them, as there would necessarily be. They ended up getting divorced eventually, but you'd have to have a lot of trust in that director in order to put yourself through that. You'd have to be a very brave actress. And I'm going to give her credit for, like, going there. That cannot be an easy thing to do. Where it gets really even more distasteful, this was originally called The Day of the Woman.
Yeah,
And
well, I think it's just, is it just AKA Day of the Woman? Is that part of the title? Or?
in order to get it distributed, he was having a real hard time finding a home for this movie just because of how ugly it was. He had to make a deal with this distribution company, and part of that deal was that they could change the title.
So they could give it this fake title where they pretend it's empowering.
Exactly.
To women? Yeah.
Well, and I think he would argue that he was trying to do that, but I think at some point the exploitation did take over. Like,
oh, for sure.
like, and by the time she's getting her revenge on these guys, like, I guess glad that she's getting revenge for these guys, but it has this weird inevitability. We know that she's going to get her revenge. We know that all of these guys deserve what's going to happen to them, and it's not going to undo anything that we've seen. It's not going to, unbreak her. Like, she's now become this multiple murderer, this victim. And if, this sort of Dexter or Punisher version of empowerment is how we're going to approach the feminist slant on this, no. I would argue that this is not a feminist movie. There's a great book. I hope I'm saying this right. If not, I guess I'll correct it. I think it's... I'm sorry, what I meant to say was Men, Women, and Chainsaws, Gender in the Modern Horror Film by Carol J. Clover. That's the book I'm trying to reference here. That's what I get for going off the fly like that. Female empowerment in horror movies, and how, even though there's a perception that women are always victimized, that if you look at them plot-wise, typically the most powerful character in a horror movie is a woman. And that there's an alternate case to be made. But the entire book is almost underlined with how much time they spend on this movie. Because in this particular case, I disagree. Whether or not the intention was there, I think we could talk about, but I would say that they failed in making this a female empowerment movie. Like, utterly.
When she gets her revenge, she still uses sexuality as her main weapon.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of right there. That's not the way, if you're going to be empowering women, that's not the way you should be using her main weapon. Nothing enjoyable happens at all in this movie until the bathtub scene.
Right.
When you see that scene and what happens on it, that is a little bit...
it is a fitting revenge,
But still what leads up to it, she goes and seduces the guy. Here, let me run you a hot bath, brings him home. There's a prolonged naked scene where they're just talking to each other in the tub. And I just don't think this is how she would get her revenge. It's effective when she cuts his dick off in the tub and leaves him screaming to bleed out.
And I think every man in the world, even though we hate this character, at some part of us is going to blanch at the idea of having her dick off. But if ever a character deserved it.
No, you don't feel bad at all for him.
No.
And arguably, I think that's probably the climax of the movie.
Right. Because
he's the main leader of the bad guy group.
Yeah.
But there's still two more guys that she has to
deal with.
Kill, just as a matter of doing it. But
one of them tried to play the sympathy card too. I'm not such a bad guy. I've got a family. Like, really?
Oh, that was the main bad guy, Johnny.
Yeah.
And we meet his wife 90 minutes into the movie. For some reason, we're introduced to a new character. I love that. No real reason. It's like, oh, now we gotta meet this lady. And I listened a little bit to. Yeah, that's right. So we're talking about the sexuality she uses to plot her revenge. Even the handicapped guy, she lets him have sex with her and waits until he's almost finished, and then she kills him.
Why?
I do not know.
Why?
Is it just so we can see her naked again?
But again, we'd seen enough. Like, 30 minutes into the movie, we'd seen enough, and there was a lot more movie to go. I fall back on my ancient argument. Who is the movie for? I don't think it's for feminist. Appreciate it's not going to sell a feminist on the horror genre. In fact, I would say it's the opposite of that. I would say that Slumber Party Massacre is a much more feminist horror movie than I Spit on Your Grave. But Yeah, I don't get off on the vengeance that much. I'm already worn out by the movie, and there's something inevitable about it. Like, she's going to get her vengeance. They're not going to roll credits on her being buried in the forest somewhere, right?
Well, there's a moment in the film, it's the second rape, where she's bent over the rock.
The second rape, yes.
Yeah. I mean, when she's being raped in that scene, she lets out possibly the most shrill scream in horror history. And it's at that point when you really, if you don't already, you don't really feel like, why am I watching this? Why am I watching this? Well, the reason I'm watching it is because my friend has a podcast and I have to finish this. But other than that, you don't feel good about yourself for watching this. There's no soundtrack. It's just screaming. And it's, I mean, I can't imagine there's guys like that out there. There probably is, but the idea of holding someone down while your friend has his way. I mean, I don't want to be around doing that. It's just so. I think that's what makes it worse. Is all these naked guys' butts around it.
Well, and I'm not saying that there's not reality to like evil men and obviously abuse of power and men and women. Obviously, that's a very real thing. But there's something dopey about these guys that takes away from their reality. The fact that they would think that this woman would actually be seducing them after they subjected her to that makes them so stupid as to lose any credibility, right? But we put up with it because at this point we need to see some vengeance taken on her behalf.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. I didn't enjoy it. I can't imagine a scenario in which I would watch it again. I don't understand or agree with it being a significant, quote, horror movie. I think the thing that makes it memorable is that it's as ugly as you would imagine it being. If ugly is what you're looking for, this delivers that, but that is all.
Yes, I know Siskel and Ebert tore this one apart.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I wrote down a quote. I was listening to some of the commentary on it just to get other insight on it, and I think they call it sick, reprehensible, and attending this movie was the most depressing moment of my life.
Ouch.
And I don't know. It's fair. I mean, at least they did not show it as an erotic thing.
Right.
They're holding her down. There's a lot of close-ups of the men's faces while they're doing it, and they're not pleasant close-ups, and a lot of man butt. But I don't know. There's probably a percentage of people that are into that kind of thing, maybe for the wrong reasons. But I don't know. These prolonged sequences are pretty disturbing.
It's scarring, and I guess like in that way, it is effective on your psyche, in that you kind of feel like you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
But that does not make it a good movie. To me.
There's sort of like a subgenre of movies, these rape revenge type films, and like this one's got, like you said, 3 sequels. And I just looked it up. It's I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu, and it was just released, I think, straight to video, and it's a direct sequel with the same cast.
Ugh.
And for some reason, it's 2.5 hours long.
I'm not interested.
90 minutes of this is hard to get through. This kind of film should not be 90 or 2.5 hours. I can't imagine a time when I would want to sit there for 2.5 hours watching that.
No, one and done, thanks.
There is, let me see, I wrote something on here. There's a more recent film called Revenge. Have you seen that?
I have not. I know it by its reputation, though.
It's, the same idea. It's a rape revenge film.
Yeah. But
that one is miles more entertaining than this. It's, I will recommend that film.
Right. I've heard a lot of people say good things about that. I'm almost never in the I'm almost never in the mood for a rape movie. You know
what I'm in the mood for tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one, it's, you got to let reality kind of go at certain points, but that one, you can't wait to see the guys get what's coming to them.
Yeah.
This one, you just can't wait for it to be over.
Over. Agreed. Well said, brother.
I want to play a game. Greetings and welcome. Right now, you are breathing in a deadly nerve agent. The only way out is to find an antidote. One is inside the safe. You all possess the combination in the back of your mind. Let the game begin.
Let's just take our time.
This whole house is a
Wait, shut the hell up! Wait!
Live or die, make your choice.
There's something that we're not seeing. You did this.
Open the door! There's nowhere to go! Where is he?
Oh, yes. There will be blood.
Saw the Second. I have been on the record on the podcast saying I'm not a big fan of the Saw franchise. I even kind of talk shit about the original Saw movie, which everyone sort of... It introduced James Wan to the world, and he's been great for the horror genre, and it was nice for him to start out the gate so successfully. But for me, if they were going to do a horror franchise movie every Halloween, I would rather it be Halloween. I would rather it be Final Destination. I will even take Paranormal Activity over the Saw franchise. I just think that the killer in this franchise gets super pretentious, it gets super convoluted, and the whole series kind of wore me out. That said, I think we're sitting down to talk about my favorite Saw movie.
I agree. Saw 2, I think, is the strongest of the franchise.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if this was a controversial opinion, because honestly, I haven't really dug that deep into the Saw world. I haven't seen Jigsaw, but I do have all of the other Saw movies. So
yeah, we're the same there. I even question really if this first Saw is really as much torture porn as it's given the reputation for. It's almost kind of a thriller. A bit more. That one I watched with my wife.
Right.
Like I watched it and I thought, you know what, I think Sarah could watch this. I found it kind of interesting, and it was different at the time. There wasn't a lot of stuff like that out.
Well, there was plenty of like Machiavellian, super smart serial killer movies. Ever since '91, when Silence of the Lambs got nominated for Oscars, all of a sudden, and Seven and movies like this, like there's always the Bone Collector or Suspect Zero or all of these evil serial killer movies. It was not uncommon, I would say.
But I mean, it was a bit, it basically took place in a washroom for, a one set kind of film. There was other scenes as well, but that was your main set piece.
Yeah.
That old dirty washroom, and you kind of watched the story unfold as it happened. You weren't really sure how it all tied together, and of course, there's the Saw twist at the end. Then that became a staple for every film. And as you mentioned, every sequel after got more convoluted and depended on other sequels. And 4, you had to know this guy from 3, and then he comes back in 6, and it got too much.
Yeah.
But I think Saw 1 and 2 stand on their own very well.
Right.
And Saw 2, you talk about having. I think you can have a lot of fun with that film.
Yeah. Just quick service to the plot. There's sort of two narratives happening, it seems, simultaneously. Donnie Wahlberg, it's Donnie Wahlberg, right?
Yeah.
He plays a grizzled cop who's dragged into this case because his name is brought up. And we're seeing video feed of these 8 hostages that are in some factory or some kind of steel mill location full of these jigsaw traps. And so to further complicate things, one of the people in the traps is the cop's son. So he wants to kill this evil serial killer, but he also needs to make sure that his son gets out of the situation okay. The stakes are really high. Here's one of the reasons I think that Saw 2 is the best of the Saw movies. When it was written, it was not written to be a Saw movie. It was originally just sort of like another one of these high-profile, super smart serial killer movies. It was,
okay.
But when they were looking for how are we going to do a sequel to Saw, they found this script and said, oh, well, with very minimal changes, this can become a Saw movie. This isn't unprecedented. They do that with the Die Hard movies, too. They have a good action script. They just switch the main character to John McClane and call it Die Hard 6 or whatever. These things happen. But I think that's fine. I mean, especially at the rate with which they were trying to get these movies out, one a year, they were just pumping they were pumping the money machine for as long as they can to make as much money as they possibly could. And it didn't seem to be in that much danger of saturating the marketplace. It still, even on its 7th film, ended very strong financially. But I think, yeah, because this wasn't really considered to be part of this vast universe, at least in its conception, the characters are more there for me than they are in most Saw movies. Even like dumbass victim number 2, who, doesn't pay attention or is overeager and gets herself killed because she, acts before she thinks. Yeah, there's the typical asshole character, but he's fairly well realized, and there's the likable character who just wants everyone to do the right thing, and to not bet on him living through this movie. But there's enough going on, and it's entertaining and engaging enough, and you want to see this inevitable twist pull out because you know that it's going to happen. At no point watching Saw 2 was I bored.
No, it moves along. And I think it helps because it keeps moving back and forth between the two scenes.
Yeah.
So when you're really getting into one, you say, oh, right, now there's this going on. Meanwhile, in the house, back with Jigsaw, and it goes back. It keeps it going.
Yeah.
And I think what I like about Saw 2, a bit more than the other ones as they go on, is the traps, which became the main thing about Saw movies. They weren't as complex as they would later become. They were kind of more simple and perhaps a bit more realistic than...
Yeah. Well, like I say, it gets exponentially more ridiculous and sort of Rube Goldberg-esque, needlessly...
Where you wonder, how did he put this together?
Yeah. What do you think of
this
Tobin Bell?
I think the traps they use in this, or even if they're traps, but or games, I guess he calls them.
Yeah.
They're more... I think they kind of go towards a lot of fears, specific fears. So if you have an eyeball issue, like me, I could never have contact lenses because I can't put my finger on my eye. Or when I see a movie with anyone's got like something by their eye, it's like, that's icky for me. I don't want to see that. It opens up with the guy has to dig a key out from behind his eye, and there's no way he can do it, or this steel cage is going to close on his head.
Squish him, yeah. You don't think you would get out of that one, huh?
If you got a fear for needles...
Yeah. Oh, that was the worst scene for me, actually, I think.
Yeah, agreed. When there's a girl crawling around on this pit of dirty... The close-up of how dirty these needles are. If you've got a fear of needles, or if you're germaphobe, anything, that's a big fear. And that's just hard to watch.
And she initially gets tossed in there, but she's trying to move like gently at first, but by the end she's just like shoveling and digging around in those needles. It's just like, oh no.
And you see needles sticking out of her arm, sticking out of her wrist. It's horrible. Another guy burns. We've got a fear of burning to death. That's there. So I think it works in that way.
Yeah.
Even the girl that kind of stupidly perhaps puts her hand in that glass box because she sees the syringe with the antidote in there. And then she gets both hands caught in those steel razor blades. And
if you notice, the lock's actually not even locked on that box. If she'd have stopped and thought before she acted, she could easily have gotten into the box. Like, the lock's hanging there, but it's clearly not locked. So it's all about, taking a second and not believing something that seems too good to be true.
It turns into a bit of a funhouse movie after a while. As things ramp up, everyone's trying to find their way out, and they got their own issues, their own problems, and that the badass of the group,
right?
It's decided he's taking charge. He's getting out. Fuck the rest. He's walked around the hallways, stalking them all with a bat with nails in it. He's got his Escape from New York moment where he plants that in the back of someone's head. I mean, at that point, it becomes fun because there's so much going on, and now this guy has just lost it. He's getting out, and
and you get, it's not just. I mean, obviously, it's a cliche. There's usually that one character that's pain in the ass, but because of the sort of preachy, punishy idea that they're going with this Saw character, there's a lot of built-in conflicts and a lot of built-in flaws with these characters. It's interesting, though, that it's all about the Donnie Wahlberg sort of somewhat crooked cop character, right? What do you think of Tobin Bell?
I don't know if I really have a strong opinion of him.
Yeah, I think...
He'll always kind of, he pops up in other genre films, but he's always kind of Jigsaw to me. But
I think Tobin Bell thinks he's pretty awesome. I don't know. I don't know if it's just the character from Saw, because I think the character is highly pretentious. But I think, again, and it gets worse the deeper we get into this, but... I get the feeling like Tobin Bell really genuinely loves Jigsaw. Like, thinks that this guy's...
So you're going to say Tobin Bell really genuinely loves Tobin Bell.
Oh, no, well, maybe that too. But he seems to kind of believe the press on Jigsaw, and I've never bought that. He also kills the cops that are investigating him, and also throughout the movies, a lot of innocent people die to the left and right. He is not any kind of even halfway close noble, Dexter figure, whatever they're trying to go for. And for me, when he's doing his Tobin Bell monologuing and trying to be that, in all of the movies, that's when it's the least interesting. and I would say that's also true here.
And he also says that, right? Like, I've never killed anybody.
Yes.
And
yeah.
so, well,
no, you killed these people.
You put a steel trap on someone's head on a timer to close. You kidnap these people, put them in a house with poisonous gas. Yeah, you've killed people.
If you tie someone to a chair, leave them in a house, and light the house on fire, technically the fire or the smoke inhalation will kill them, but you killed that person. Like, come on. And the fact that he can't see, or that the audience is expected not to make that leap, is kind of, I don't know. It's one of the fatal flaws of the whole franchise, I think.
Yeah, I think so. In this movie specifically, I enjoyed the reveal of the original Saw bathroom near the end when they're walking through the house. Back when this was just 2 films, it was kind of neat to have that callback and say, oh, look, I recognize this. The guy's foot's still laying there. The bodies are all decomposed now. And so I thought that was kind of neat and unique at that point. But
and they play with time a little bit here, and they're going to go double and triple down on this as the series moves forward. And
that's when you get the twist, right?
Yeah, I like the idea that they believe that this was a live feed, but that everything that they watched has already taken place. His son is in the room with them the whole time. He's okay.
In a safe
location. Yeah. But again, everything goes about as perfectly as they possibly could for Jigsaw, and I think Tobin Bell really gets off on that.
And it's always a little bit convenient how everything always goes exactly how he planned it would. And he's going to drive him to this house right at this moment, and then, it works, I guess. But the end twist with is it Amanda, Shawnee Smith,
right? She's in on it,
right?
Yeah,
and it's kind of a big twist at the end. He's like, oh wow, but I find upon repeat viewings, I don't know if that twist really holds up.
If it makes sense,
she seems genuinely afraid, and she's going through this with everybody.
And she went into that pit of fucking needles. Like, that's commitment to a bit, man.
Like, I wonder how much involved she was with it. Yeah. Was she, I don't know, just there to make sure everything kind of follows the rules? Or
yeah, I don't know.
There's times where I'm watching it and it doesn't really, when there's a movie with a twist, you want to be able to rewatch it and then see clues to that twist. As you watch it a second time, say, okay, this does make sense now.
How did you fool me? And if I didn't, if I watch it again and say, oh, you didn't, you just kind of lied, then I kind of resent that, But, a good twist is a good twist. I talk a lot of shit about Shyamalan, but The Sixth Sense is a really strong twist. When I watched it the second time, I felt stupid. That meant that the movie was smart. Okay, so. I don't know what more to say about Saw 2. Like I say, I'll give it the low praise of being my favorite Saw movie, but I've never considered myself a big Saw dude.
Right.
I think you know what this is? I think it's probably lower on the scale of what like a hardcore torture porn fan is into, because the deaths aren't as drawn out for the most part. It's just more the idea. I guess that burning is pretty bad. But a lot of it's more the idea than sort of bathing in the actual violence in this movie. And it's quick. There's lots of characters. There's lots of blood. And it moves. So it held my attention. I did not regret my time with Saw 2.
Fair enough. I did not think we'd have 8 of these.
Right.
But,
and I don't think we need
Saw
8
2,
of them.
I think they hit the high point.
Yeah.
On va rapporter le plus beau des sapins et c'est toi qui vas le décorer.
On est tous réunis pour Noël. Je vous aime, vous êtes ma famille.
Oh, tu entends, ma chaîne, on est la famille. De rien! Oh.
I'm in the mood for love.
On va reprendre notre vie comme avant. Hein. Tu veux bien?
There's just nothing worse than being a starving artist, is there?
I guess not, hey?
The main character of CALVAIRE, or The Ordeal, is trying to make his living as an artist and singer, actor, anything he can, and he lives out of his vehicle, which promptly dies in the middle of nowhere, and he goes to a quaint-looking village for help. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing. The end.
This is a kind of one of these slow-moving train wrecks where you can see that shit's gonna go south, and you're kind of helpless to witness and watch it go south. But I think the director, in order to sort of help the bitterness of the torture porny stuff that we're gonna see go down, has sort of put a layer of absurdity and art cinema on top of this. There is a main villain, this guy that we see the cracks of his sanity, and we see him going, like, clearly being bad news, and we sort of focus our energy on that. But what I think is interesting about CALVAIRE is how this whole village is fucking crazy.
Wow. Yeah,
it's
much unlike Spit on Your Grave. You're not immediately sure where this is going.
Right.
You know you're watching a horror movie, and his van breaks down, so you say, okay, I've seen this kind of, but the weirdness that kind of follows, you're not really sure exactly what's happening, and then you're right. Our main character goes for a walk, and I think he sees some villagers, I think, fucking a pig.
Yeah, a little boy is fucking a pig, and his parents are watching this with like something like awe.
Yeah, and they're thinking, okay, this is going to get weird, and it gets weirder than that.
But I guess that's my question. I mean, does this sort of art, I don't know how else to describe it, this sort of art wank angle to the movie, is it helpful to the proceedings, or does it take away from the horror?
I think that the artist or the singer, whatever he is, I think that helps the bond with the innkeeper, that Bartel, or whatever, because he was a comedian, I guess, and he considered himself an artist, and his wife was an artist.
There's a baseline respect between them because of that.
So I think that character line, that trait, was probably important to have. But I don't know if that's why it got so strange. I mean, as soon as his van breaks down, it's a rainy night. He's out in the woods, and he meets I wrote the guy's name, Boris.
Yes.
That Boris character. He's out there looking for his dog, and that Boris guy, he's just so he spends the whole movie looking for his dog Bella, his air quote dog.
Yeah.
and that guy gets weirder and weirder, and we meet Bartel, and he gets a little bit odd, and you're sort of interested because the village is hiding something. There's some story going on here that we don't know.
But we never really do, though, is the sort of thing.
That's true. And not really much happens for half the movie, in fairness.
You're waiting for it, though. I mean, I wasn't bored, necessarily.
I found the first 43 minutes I was more interested in it because I'm just kind of like curious what's happening and what's going on here. And we know something's going to happen because it's a horror movie, but it's Mark Stevens, the main character. He doesn't know that he's in a horror movie, obviously, so he kind of goes along. Now, can we just talk a moment about the dance scene?
Yeah, I knew this was going to happen.
This has to come up. What the fuck? Okay, you say something about it. What to say about it?
Again, it seems it's also a cutaway scene. It's also weird because none of the major players witness it, right? We witness it, but yeah, all of the denizens in this local pub just sort of get out of their seats and start doing this super fucked up dance, and these weird rictus smiles are on their faces, and they're loving it, but it almost seems not completely voluntary either. Like it's
like zombie or like cultish or something.
Yeah,
and
I started thinking Wicker Man or some sort of cult thing, or like there was a mental institution in the woods somewhere that got emptied out and they just took over the town. At first, I was just thinking that there was a handful of these people, and Texas Chainsaw idea, like people who lived in isolation for so long that their eccentricities got sharpened into something really ugly, and really dangerous and crazy. But that's the thing; it's the whole town. They're all crazy, and we're never told why. And that dance scene stayed with me more than, this dude being gang raped by all the people of the town, right?
I'll agree.
I don't know. I don't know what the experience, like, the takeaway from the movie is, like, what the director wants me to feel after this is over. I certainly will say I've never seen a movie like it. And it was, like, the ordeal does make sense. Like this guy is put through the fucking ringer. But in the end, I'm not sure how to sit on the movie. I think it's more interesting because of its eccentricity, but because it offers no explanation at all, I'm also sort of left a little bit hanging, a little bit narratively frustrated with it.
Because the main thing that happens we didn't really even get into is the innkeeper starts believing that Mark Stevens is his ex-wife, or I believe, right?
Yeah.
And we think, okay, well, this guy's he's losing it, so maybe this guy's just
our
crazy.
problem.
But then, for some reason, the entire town believes that this is his ex-wife Gloria come back, and that's where it gets really strange. Like, what's happening here? Why does everybody become convinced, and everybody starts killing each other?
He even briefly plays the role of Gloria, right?
Pardon me?
The Mark acts the role in one of those scenes of her to I don't know. So it's not about, or unless he's really being possessed, it was just him rolling with the subterfuge, I guess.
Maybe.
And he slowly allows a dude to drown in ice cold mud, but you're pretty indifferent.
Yeah, the ending. I mean, if we can discuss that just kind of briefly, you're right. Before that, when the shit really hits the fan, there's a dinner scene, kind of. And when I was watching it, it's zany, and all I could think about is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Hard to avoid.
And I thought, okay, well, this is just Chainsaw Massacre, and I kind of didn't like it for that reason, because of the, well, don't just copy that. I watched some behind the scenes stuff afterwards, and I realized he's a huge fan of that movie, and he wanted to do a tribute to it. So it's like, well, I guess that's sort of different then. It's a tribute rather than a ripoff, so I can see that there.
He at least acknowledged it.
Right. But what happens after that, there's a big shootout, which kind of is hard to follow with the darkness and the camera angles. Our main character gets raped and beaten and tortured, and there's this screaming of a pig through it all. And I found the sound of a screaming pig is awful. It's horrendous to listen to in the background, and it's just, I don't know. But what follows is kind of a weak ending, I felt. He just sort of gets away, and this gang of men follow him through the woods in like the least exciting, slowest chase I've ever seen. Nobody's running. They see each other. They're not that far apart, but they keep walking after him. Eventually, there's only one person walking after him, and he falls in the quicksand. And the weird part at the end, he's saying, "Gloria, did you love me? Did you love me?" And Mark kneels down and he says, I think he whispers, "I loved you." And then he dies, and it's over. And right when it was over, I thought, I didn't like this movie.
But doesn't leave your brain, though, is the thing.
That's exactly what happened. I thought right after it was over, I thought, this was less enjoyable than I Spit on Your Grave. And I put it down there. And then the next day, all I could think about all day long was this damn movie and that dance scene. And what did the ending mean? And why is this happening? And I kept thinking about the whole movie. It stuck with me. So, and I thought, I'm going to have to watch this again to try and I watched bits of it afterwards. I still don't understand it, but there's something happening there. It's just maybe not a fully realized film, but there's something there.
I think, because the basic story, car trouble, you knock on the wrong door for help, has been so much more than done. They even add the rain, right? It's been so done. I think it was how do we make this fresh? And I think what they did was they might have thrown in a percentage of David Lynch, a percentage of sort of art house weirdness. And that was almost enough to make what would be otherwise kind of derivative, kind of interesting. But I do think it's sort of a lacquer. It's a coat of paint that they put on it. I don't think it's a movie that can be or even asks to be decoded. It's an ordeal. You just experience this shit that goes down just like our main character Mark does. It's our ordeal as much as it is his. But it is interesting when it breaks away. Like, again, usually we're stuck with Mark's perspective, but we see that the rest of the town is crazy before he does, right? Although, for me, you're right. That scene with the kid and the pig would have been enough for me to say, you know what? I'm going to go sleep in my broken van. And you're right how drawn out it is. Like, the guy keeps on saying he's going to fix his van and that they're going to have him out of there, they're going to have it out, and then clearly that's not happening at all.
No, he doesn't want him to leave.
Yeah, he wants
him
him
to... After he sings him the song, I think that he really says, I'm keeping you. Yeah. You're Gloria.
Yeah.
And, I mean, which would be fine if it's just a guy with a mental illness or whatever reason. But it's so strange why the whole town... He goes to the bar, Bartel, and he says, everybody, my wife is back, stay away from her. and
they accept it. They accept
it.
And
he leaves. This guy hammers on the piano, and they all start doing that crazy dance. And the next day at work, I'm talking to people about this film, and they say, oh, that dance scene. Everybody was like, wow, that was so creepy. So it stuck with me.
But again, that's the stuff that sticks with you more than the violence, more than the violation, more than the slow sort of peeling back of the psyche. It's the strangeness.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if I really enjoyed it.
But it was hard to shake.
It was it made me... I don't know what it made me do. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for.
Well, not to drop to spoilers too much, I do think it is, of the two French extreme horror movies that we watched, the one that I actually ended up preferring. So, surprise, surprise! I really like. Well, we'll talk about the other movie when we talk about the other movie. But is there anything else you want to say about CALVAIRE?
No, I don't think so.
I think that it's weird and interesting enough that if you're curious, I would say yes, take a look at it. It's not for everyone.
No, this was my first time watching it, actually. It was on the shelf for a while, and I thought, okay, I got to get around to this, and podcast was kind of an excuse to.
Boom.
And there you go.
Es kommt auf die Jahreszeit an. Et la valeur des dollars. Roshi Ajin no Toko Tashiba Yasuyo. Maksai Goyan, Bei Ganadayan, Gangsesin. Pero si usted quiere una chica americana, kann das teuer werden.
Don't you want to be here? We're me to die.
Hostel Teil 2.
Please, stop my boy.
So, Mr. Eli Roth, have you seen the TV show he did on AMC, Eli Roth's History of Horror?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the documentary series, but I'm never sure if I can believe the hype on Eli Roth or not. Like, I want to believe the hype on Eli Roth, but it doesn't always pay out for me. Everybody seems to like Cabin Fever more than I do, right?
I enjoy Cabin Fever, for the record, yeah.
Yeah, and I liked the first Hostel, but I did not love the first Hostel. This is actually the second sequel in a row that not in a row, this episode that we're talking about, but it's the second sequel that I would argue is considerably better than the first installment of the franchise.
You think so?
I do. The focus is no longer obnoxious American men. So they're slightly more like a bunch of American women. And at first you'd think, oh good, so now we're going to see all this torture put on the women. We've been here before. But what Hostel 2 does, which I appreciate, is actually attack the psychology of the torturers themselves. For me, the B story about these two American businessmen who have come to participate in these torture things is kind of the most interesting part of the movie. The rest of the stuff, we kind of know what we're going to get and we kind of know what to expect. But I appreciate that we get into the psychology of the villains more than we did in the first movie. There was this sort of vibe of cultural vengeance that they were tapping into for Hostel 1. For this one, it's the psychology of somebody who would pay good money to torture and kill someone. And
Right.
since so few of these torture movies even begin to pretend to attack the psychology seriously, I respected that.
Yeah, that's fair. Whereas the first one, I think, was more about the idea of paying to torture or kill, and it was done. Or sorry, the tip to that was torturing an American
Yes.
was more expensive, right? The opportunity to torture Americans. So that was kind of in the first one. This one, the Americans are doing the torture. So, and they really kind of explored how that changes you, or the idea.
And these two men, one of which the guy seems really into it, and the other one seems to be dragged along, and how psychologically they kind of switch places over the course of the movie. Again, I found that a lot more interesting. Also, it's a very learned slasher, horror, torture porn movie. There's an entire kill sequence that is based off of Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. There's a real historical figure who believed that she could extend her life or continue to look young by bathing in virgin blood, and turn to murder to make that happen. We see that all sort of played out. And again, the character is so sympathetic on the verge of pathetic that seeing her die such an awful death does get, at least for me, a visceral reaction. It's just, nobody gave this character any pity at any point, and that's her whole story.
Such a bloody scene, much blood.
Brutal.
The sound design in that scene also stood out. When she's dragging that blade across her back and her butt cheeks, and you just hear that. But I find the girl that died in that scene, a lot of them, they're kind of cardboard cutout characters. I guess she was the virginal nerd kind of character, I guess you'd call her.
Keeping her little personal, pretentious diary of her European adventures and...
what else can we say here? Give me one moment.
The actress is Heather Mazzarello, I want to say. I hope I'm not totally... she was in this infamous indie Todd Solondz movie called Welcome to the Doll's House.
Okay.
And if you're familiar with that movie, her character is so funny / awful that there might be a little bit of schadenfreude when you watch this movie, seeing that happening to her. But that's not how the character's played. Like I said, she's sympathetic, but almost riding the line of pathetic as well. But I still felt bad for her, because the second I saw her, I knew she wasn't going to make the end credits of this movie.
And it's, talk about the subject of these 6 movies. This is the one movie of the 6 where it's literally about torturing people. So, that is what the movie is about, but not, they admit it. The whole point of the movie is we're paying to torture somebody. So, technically, I guess it would be literally torture porn for these guys that are paying for this experience.
That's right.
And there's not a lot of actual torture in the movie until you get to about the final 20 minutes or so.
The first Hostel was sparing. The first Hostel was sparing in that too. They have the reputation of being really hard. They earn it with a couple of really hard scenes, but it's not wall-to-wall torture.
No, but once it happens, it happens. There's a castration scene in I Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah.
This one outdoes that. It blows that out of the water by being a little bit way too graphic. There's definite torture scenes in here, but I think the way it's done with Eli Roth is he kind of all his films. There's horrific things that you see, but there's also now and then a sense of fun.
Right.
For something, he puts in a little bit of humor, or when you see somebody get killed in these movies, your reaction is, oh no, that's gross. Oh, look at that. You don't feel that fear, that oh no, I'm horrified.
Right.
It's kind of because it's so over the top when it hits. When that girl gets the saw kind of caught in her hair and it rips off half her face,
it half
scalps
her.
Oh man, look at that.
Ugh. And again, it's the slow leading up to it as he spins the saw as it's getting closer to her, and then catches in her hair, and he's as horrified as anybody else. This is what just happened, and
Yeah, that's when he loses his appetite for the torture, right?
Right
like
away.
The fear got from her, but when he saw the result of the blade, he's out.
This is not me. This is not what I want. And this idea that he had that somehow by killing a person, other people would sense that there was power in him, is really fucked.
People are going to look at you differently after you've killed somebody.
I want to talk about, too, I was going to open with this, but I forgot. This movie does the thing that a lot of franchise horror movies does by killing off the main character of the previous movie in the opening sequence of it.
That's right.
And it's one of those things, the second I saw Paxton in the movie, I was like, oh, he's dead, right? But I don't know why there's something profoundly disturbing to me about that cat licking on his severed, the neck hole. They took his head, apparently. But
that's
his
what cats do.
Girlfriend discovers him headless, and the cat's just licking away at the neck hole, and there was something just awful about that.
Yeah, those kind of openings, I mean, it's kind of unnecessary. It's the connection between the two movies, I guess. We got to have the survivor and then kill him. And they actually kill him twice. First one's a dream sequence.
Right.
Then he wakes up, and then they get to kill him again. Maybe it's just an excuse to have 2 more murders in the movie.
It's true. You could argue that it has no narrative business in this movie at all, but I mean, it's just one of those things that horror movie franchises do that I thought I would acknowledge.
And then after 10 minutes, we can start our movie.
Exactly.
Now we're going to meet the people in this movie and start the story. That's funny. I was going to mention the opening too. The other thing that stood out for me, the group of kids, I think they're called the Bubblegum Gang.
Right.
In the first one.
They're back again.
Yeah, but not as I recall. I'm thinking their inclusion in the first one was kind of fun a bit and sort of surprising, but I really did not like that group of kids in this.
There's nothing lovable about them anymore.
No, it was kind of dumb and unnecessary.
They're being raised to be these human traffickers, it looks like.
And at one point, a gun is kind of put to all of their heads one by one, and it's supposed to be shocking, I guess, but it's sort of, I don't know. There's no real reason to it, and I don't think we care.
It's a random narrative thread in the film. Like, why are we spending time with these people right now? Which
leads to the ending.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
soccer
after
game?
The ending, when our lead girl kind of buys her way out of her situation, and the film ends with these kids playing soccer with a girl's head and scoring a goal in full soccer cheer, lifting their shirt up. And Eli Roth, I saw somewhere, he loved that ending. All along, he knew that's how we're going to end the movie. And I think that's the worst part of this movie. It's like, what the...
Yeah, it's tonally way off. I think he just loved working with those kids was the problem. The sequence that I like is the turning point when they go to the secluded spa, and they go in there. They're in this nice salty warm water, and it's like this nice relaxing thing. But the girl that has brought them there knows that the second they leave or attempt to leave the spa, their nightmare is truly going to begin. So there's something about the way she's enjoying how much they're enjoying themselves that kind of came across to me.
The Slovakian spa, which is so clearly the Blue Lagoon.
Yeah. And again, I liked our characters. I was not expecting them to live through the movie, frankly. Like, I did not know how she was going to get herself out of this scenario. And not only did she get herself out of the scenario, she got to castrate her torture.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of convenient the way she got out, kind of a quick, easy way out. I was sort of disappointed in that.
And again, it doesn't definitely jibe with this weird culty organization that they have. Like, you wouldn't think they would allow anybody out of there, like, under any circumstances, no matter how much money was put on the table. This is something that would not be easy to maintain. But I think that, like a good sequel did, it kind of grew and expanded on the ideas that were sort of established in the first HOSTEL movie. The characters were female this time around, and generally speaking, I think more likable than the characters we got in the first movie.
Yeah.
I'll agree with you that the kids' soccer game thing was kind of a weird and distasteful way to end the movie, but it was that kind of ugly, crazy movie that... It didn't seem inappropriate to the world, but it seemed irrelevant to the story that we were being told.
It totally just didn't fit.
Didn't need to be there. Probably shouldn't have been there. But again, I liked Hostel 2 more than I expected to. So.
There's one more character in there. They meet this guy. I can't remember his name. Miroslav, I think.
Okay.
Something like that. And all along, he's trying to hit on one of the girls, and you sort of get the feeling that he's in on the whole hostel situation, or that he's helping get these women.
Right.
Until we see him being tortured at the end and actually eaten.
Yeah, he was just a guy who was trying to make friends with the pretty ladies.
Yeah, and then you find, oh shit, he's getting to be even worse than anybody. So they kind of lead you to think one way and turn it the other way. There's stuff in here. One thing I was kind of surprised by Eli Roth specifically, our character is torturing the main girl. He can't really bring himself to do it, so he goes to finish off her friend.
Right.
And kind of get that bravado and the blood on him that makes him feel like a man, I guess. I'm so surprised they did not show him actually what he does to that girl. He shows him go into the room and they cut away.
Yeah.
It's very unlike Eli Roth to cut away, I find.
Well, the shock and the hurt is that we've lost that character. I mean, we knew we were going to lose that character, but in a way, how he does it is immaterial. The horror is that he tells her, I'm going to go kill your friend now, and then he goes and kills her friend.
Yeah, true.
But no, you're right. It's a rare sort of restraint. A rare feat of restraint from Eli Roth. So we'll give him that. And that's not indicative of the rest of the movie.
No, he doesn't shy away from showing you what's happening.
I was pleasantly surprised by Hostel 2. I'll say it again. I think I liked it overall more than the first. And if you're into this type of movie, go ahead.
Sure.
What the bloody hell are you mob doing out here? Scared the shit out of me.
So, where do you live?
Oh, I get around, Never know where I might pop up.
What do you actually do?
I can tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Let's play.
So a rare thing happened when I was reviewing, when I rewatched Wolf Creek. I've kind of turned around on it. I have to say the first time I saw Wolf Creek was not much of a fan, to be honest. It could have been like just the wrong day, the wrong movie on the wrong day. But for me, it was just so uniformly unpleasant, and that the humor that a lot of people seem to be getting out of it, I didn't. The joy that they took out of this John Jarratt actor who was playing Mick Taylor, I could not get behind. Tarantino's a big fan of this guy. He actually put him in Django Unchained for a couple of scenes. I was so overwhelmed by the ugliness of the movie that I think I overlooked the craft in the movie. Because in the end of the day, watching it again, I have to concede it's a really scary movie. It's upsetting and disturbing, and it's doing everything that it wants to do well. Now, just because torture porn isn't my favorite genre doesn't mean I should dismiss a good entry of it when I see it. And I think maybe the first time around I was just so off-put by it that I dismissed it. But watching it again and having seen some of the other movies that McClane has made, I'm much more on board with Wolf Creek than I had been originally. That said, it is not a walk in the park. It is not a movie for everyone. It's not one that you're going to watch with your mom.
Maybe not.
But this tale of backpackers who encounter the wrong man in the obscure outback in Australia, and the ordeal that they are subjected to it's harrowing and very well acted and executed. How much joy you get out of it, I think, is going to be a matter of individual taste. But upon revisiting it again, no, there's real craft to this. it's not for everyone, but for the people who like this type of movie, it's a pretty good one.
I agree. You talk about the ugliness of it, and I mean, it's worth pointing out that on the timer on the movie, I think it's 53 minutes past before we really get ugly.
Right.
Before we see that Mick is actually doing bad things. And that's actually a long time to wait in a horror movie for someone to be in danger, but I don't think it drags.
Nope.
I think what it does, it genuinely makes us like these people.
So
maybe
it hurts more.
Differently from the random collection of people in the Saw movie or the stereotype characters in HOSTEL. I think that these are people that you really start to know, and you start to actually really like this nice group of kids. The guy, there's two girls and a guy traveling through the outback, I guess. The guy's a party guy, but at heart he comes across as a nice guy. I like that he's got a bit of a crush on the nice shy girl, and she kind of likes him too. There's sort of a cuteness there.
Yeah.
They share a nice moment together when they're sightseeing on the crater. And they're not the stereotype college meathead, sex-crazed characters you usually see in these films. So you actually don't want anything bad to happen to them. You want them to get away from a bad situation. At least that's how I felt. Where HOSTEL, you can't wait to see, I wonder what's going to happen to her. Oh, she's going to get it good, and that kind of thing. But this one, I felt fear for them, and I thought, I want you to get away. And I think that's what really is the strong point of this film.
And the horrible, slow, at least for me the first time I watched it, realization that they weren't going to get away. Well, I guess that's not fair. The dude walks through a desert and has his own sort of survival ordeal. But the two women who get left in the grips of Mick, and how one of them gets out, but she goes back to try and save the other one, and she's doing everything right, and it's going to cost her everything. And the malicious, brutal fucking joy that Mick is taking in all of this. And the way the movie keeps on making you think that maybe they're going to get away, but they're not going to get away. When watching the movie again, when Mick gets shot in the throat and she leaves the room without taking the rifle, I'm like, God damn it, what are you doing? But when you react that way watching a movie, it's got you in its grip.
Yeah. She was supposed to save her friend and get her out of there.
Yeah.
Interesting that the girl who essentially comes across as our main character is the first one to, I guess, die.
Right.
Or not, I guess, die. I guess he turns her into a
head on a stick, as he calls it.
Head on a stick, yeah. So he kind of just paralyzes her.
And again, as he's doing this to her, as he's rendering her paralyzed, he's laughing at her and telling her that she's a fucking head on a stick. Yeah. And that was the stuff that I really did not like when I first watched it. Because I could just picture people cackling at that in the theater. It was like, I remember seeing Kill Bill in the theater, and there's that whole scene where the dude is describing how to rape a coma victim.
Oh, God.
And people were cackling in the theater, and I was like, fuck this movie. But it wasn't the movie. It was the people cackling in the audience that gave me that response.
I think with that, I think it's partly the Tarantino delivery.
Yeah. But I think that the character, Mick, thinks this is great, but that the movie doesn't. That the movie, we want to find this horrifying. We are cheering for this girl, and best case scenario, even if she somehow managed to survive at this point, she is permafucked by this guy.
Oh, the girls scream in terror. It appears genuine.
Yeah.
And you feel it there.
And she had been doing so much right. She'd been doing so much right for so long that, it sucks. But you react emotionally, which tells me I'm in the hands of a good filmmaker.
And so when they meet Mick, he seems like a fairly nice, easygoing guy. And he's going to fix their car for him. He takes him back to his place. And he's sort of, I guess he's a little bit off-putting at times, or a little curious. But overall, he's joking. They're having a good time. They're having a drink around the fire with him. And then they go to sleep, and they wake up. And something has happened during the time they've all been asleep.
Yeah.
Right? We don't really know.
One
of them wakes up, she's tied up. The other one's screaming. She's already bloodied. Something's already happened to her. Most of her torture has already occurred off screen.
Yeah.
And we don't really see what's happened. He kind of points to another body that he's got tied up against the wall that's obviously been there for some time.
While. It's the smile. In a way, he lives up to every cheesy Australian stereotype that like an outsider might have. He sort of fits that Crocodile Dundee with the hat and that like always got a half smile on his face, but the smile never quite reaching his eyes. Starts off laughing in a sort of jovial, aren't we all buddies kind of way, but then the laugh slowly turns into I'm laughing at you because you have no idea the fucking rat's nest that you just put yourself in.
And there's moments of that awkwardness around the fire
Yep.
when he would just stop talking and stare at the guy, and they just stare, and it's awkward, and someone's got to break the silence, so they have a little burping contest. Just
But
it up.
It's going to get ugly. He brought them there so that it can get ugly, and he knows it, and he slowly lets them know it.
Well, when that girl wakes up and goes to save her friend, they don't know what's happened. They don't know where the guy is. He's probably dead, all they know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it's, oh shit, bad things are happening right now, and we have to get out of here, wherever here is. And that's one thing they did great, actually, with the camera work in the film. There's some great shots that add to the isolation. You don't see anybody around.
No.
And they're driving, and
you can't walk out
like
of there. You can't
scream as loud as you want. There's no one's going to hear you.
Nope. And it's sort of inspired by a real series of like backpackers gone missing in Australia. They don't know exactly what happened to these people, but something like this is not too far off of the range, you know. Again, in the middle of nowhere, if you go to the wrong place for help, you're fucked.
Another thing I wanted to point out that I really actually like about this film is the movie it is before it becomes Wolf Creek. Because it takes a while to become the movie Wolf Creek that you remember it as. It's sort of like the characters are in a creepy, eerie feeling movie, and then they accidentally drove into another movie.
Right.
We meet them, and where's my note on that? Because there's some sort of unrelated stories that they tell about UFOs,
right,
and that kind of thing. Because you're going to the Wolf Creek crater, which is this huge crater.
Known for weird supernatural
right,
stuff.
And there's some weird stuff that happens around that crater because their watches all stop at the exact same time. The car battery dies, and they get freaked out. They have to sleep overnight in the car.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a creepy scene to me because I forgot what this movie was about at that point. The first time I watched it, I forgot, eventually there's the Australian guy going to come. But I thought, yeah, something kind of weird is happening here. So this movie, there's almost like another story that could be told.
Yeah. They like to sort of lead you one way and then sort of suddenly shift you into a different direction. And McLean doesn't mind taking his time. Did you ever see Rogue? Big saltwater crocodile movie?
I haven't seen Rogue, no.
Same sort of thing. Even John Jarrett's in that, and he plays like a likable character in that version. But it's a good 40 minutes before the shit properly hits the fan. But by the time that it does, you know everybody, so it kind of matters more. And that template is definitely true in Wolf Creek as well.
Yeah, to make it matter, it's a big thing. But yeah, I kind of liked where it was going even before it started changing directions. Even when they meet Mick, he's driving up in the distance. They're terrified because they think it's a UFO or it's an alien.
Yeah.
Right? And
they're terrified for the wrong reason.
Thank God you're not an alien. We thought you're an alien. Whew. I haven't seen the sequel or the TV series they've got based on, so I don't know if they addressed the crater more in that at all. But I found that kind of interesting anyways. But
well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I might have a look at the sequel now because, like I said, I've sort of revised my position on Wolf Creek. I still think it's a pretty unpleasant movie, but I think it's doing everything that it wants to do very well. There's nothing accidental about how it's fucking with you in this movie. So, you know, I think if I see a cheap copy of Wolf Creek 2, I will eventually, hopefully, you know, find time for it. But it's nice. It's one of the things that I like about the podcast is like... I sort of made up my mind about Wolf Creek, and then I watched it again, and I changed it. So,
I guess you're comparing it to other films.
Again, the wrong movie on the wrong day. If you watch the wrong movie on the wrong day, I firmly believe it can sour the experience for you. So, this might not brighten your day, but if in this type of, as far as this type of movie goes, I think this is a pretty solid one.
This kind of movie, our hero girl, whatever, she starts walking around and she starts finding artifacts from other people he's done this to, looks at video cameras and that kind of thing. And she sees video footage of another couple that he's picked up the identical way by driving up to that crater where their car had, for some reason, died. So
right.
This seems to be his routine. He goes out there because something happens to people's car batteries there for whatever reason, or if maybe he's messing with them.
If he's messing with them, they never show that. But that's an interesting angle. I didn't really consider it, but you're right. It was exactly the same thing. And it's also just a good way of doing it. You know, in a worse movie, there would have been, I don't know, somebody chained to the wall who would tell them this whole story, or there would be some other piece of exposition about other backpackers that had gone missing. But no, we see all of that once we're in the lair. There was no way she could have avoided this fate because she didn't know about this dude until she met him.
And if I was just going to point out one flaw, it's because we've said mostly nice things about this movie for the type of film. There is one area, I mean, after an hour and a half, we see the last of our killer, Mick Taylor. But the movie continues on for another 5-6 minutes as it shows finally the character of Ben. He wakes up, he's been alive this whole time, but kind of crucified, nailed to a wall, I believe. He frees himself and walks away, kind of goes mad a bit in the desert, as you said. And there's some strange shots of the sun in the sequence. There's like a sunset, the sunrise, it shows an eclipse, and he's just kind of going mad. And then finally he gets rescued. Now, they end it with kind of text on the screen explaining what happens now, that it's based on a true story. But the problem with that is it's told by the only survivor who would have had no idea of what happened to these two girls because he was, nailed to a wall this whole time. So if it's going to end with saying this is a true story wrap-up, told from the point of view from the one guy that saw none of it, it sort of doesn't make any sense that way. But
we don't know what happened. They would have to extrapolate what happened. It's sort of like that open water movie with the couple in the ocean. We don't know what happened to them, but something fucking awful happened to them, right?
If it's going to be based on a true story, what they're going to do is fall asleep around the fire and then wake up, and where is everybody? The end. Yeah. And that would make a shitty movie. So, you got to make some stuff up.
Yeah. Check out Wolf Creek if you haven't. There's been a lot of talk about the extreme French horror movies. High Tension was one of the high watermarks of that. I kind of felt like the twist kind of hurt that movie a lot. But there's definitely been some tough French thrillers that came out. Martyrs comes to mind. Inside.
The French don't fuck around, do they?
They get their hands dirty. Inside is one of the more harrowing movies I've ever subjected myself to. And I like to think I have a pretty thick skin. So Xavier Gens, Xaviergens is the name of this director. He made a movie in Winnipeg called The Divide about a bunch of people surviving a nuclear holocaust in the basement of a building.
Okay. I've seen that movie. That's one of the most grim movies I think I've ever seen.
You would think that Frontiers was pretty grim until you watched the fucking Divide, which is just like the ugliest shit ever. But he does have something tactile about his filmmaking that when shit goes bad in his movies, you feel it. Emotionally, you feel it viscerally. Frontiers is about these people who are fleeing some sort of political uprising that's happened in Paris. There's riots going on. But you get the feeling that these people themselves are not clean. They have a bag of money that they maybe didn't come by too honestly. And our main protagonist also has this extra layer of stress because she's got a bun in the oven. And once again, as they're fleeing this chaos, they knock on the wrong door for help. And it's interesting how these villains keep escalating. At first, they seem kind of crazy. Then they're a little bit Nazi. Then they're a lot cannibal. So the problems just keep on getting worse and worse and worse. I do feel it in the visceral moments of violence and like torment that takes place. Like, I do get involved with it, but I never felt as sucked into the movie as I did with The Divide. I never felt as sympathetic to any of the characters as I did with The Divide. I watched it, it held my attention, but it didn't stay in my memory the way a lot of these French hard thrillers have in the past. Say what you will about The Ordeal, it stuck with me. Frontiers didn't as much. So I can tell that it's made by a good filmmaker, but I think that it was more of ushering in or suggesting things to come than being of itself a classic horror movie. It's good, but I maybe think it might fall short of being good enough for me. But I'm willing to hear a second opinion.
Well, I think this is where we're going to really
disagree.
We're going to be on opposite sides here, because this was the first time I watched this film, and I had been looking forward to seeing this one because it had a bit of a reputation.
Oh, it's got a reputation, not unearned.
So I wanted to see that, and I was kind of looking forward to it, and it delivered for me. I found I didn't take any notes really when I watched it. It was a first-time view, and there's a lot happening. As you said, it's all over the place. Plus the subtitles, so you got to read. So I had to give it my full attention, and sometimes in those things I'll stop the movie, jot something down. But I just kept going with it, and it was over, and I thought, fuck, I didn't write anything down, so I had to rewatch some points. I found it. Well, I mean, we can start. You started with talking about the political riots, and they're a group of bank robbers or whatever they are that fleeing the city. The first kind of 20 minutes or so deals with this part of it, and when it was all said and done, I wonder if that really was necessary.
Right.
Because maybe there was some sort of symbolism I was missing or something, but it felt like it didn't really contribute to the story at all, that they had to be this kind of character.
I think something needed to corral them into this place. I guess.
It could have just as easily been a group of friends on a road trip.
Right.
Yeah, really, and then they stop at the wrong hotel and stuff happens. But I don't know. I was curious if I was missing something, but I guess not.
I don't think you were. I think what they were trying to do is keep the movie having momentum, and it's pretty good at like moving at it. Like, the shit doesn't hit the fan necessarily right away, but there's always stuff going on. It's always moving forward. You don't really feel knee deep in mud or like that the narrative is slow at any point, or at least I didn't.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate, because a lot of, especially in these movies, there's like a lot of setup. Typically, they're a little top heavy with their, meat and potatoes violence, right?
And as the Chainsaw Massacre fan I am, I think this kind of became my kind of movie.
Right.
And you're right, it's sort of weird at first, and as more characters get introduced, it gets a bit stranger.
This family is fucked.
Yeah, we start with two girls. They sort of seduce the boys and have a little fun with them. Then they meet their brother, who I assume they think he's a cop at first. And then there's a grisly fight, a car chase. They crash the car into some sort of a pit. And what follows from there is a claustrophobic scene of the two guys crawling through a tight tunnel.
Ugh.
And those sort of descent style. There's a scene in the Blair Witch remake similar like that.
Yep.
I find always those scenes where you're crawling through tight confines, I feel as a viewer I kind of hold my breath a bit, because I'm not a fan of those tight spaces.
Claustrophobia, man.
Yeah, it's another one of those things. And down in that pit, you sort of see some creatures, humanoid kind of creatures crawling around. You don't know what those are at that point, but there's some weird shit going on everywhere. It turns in those are like inbred offspring or something, but...
It definitely asks more questions than it answers, although I didn't walk away from the movie feeling nagged by that. I think that part of the idea was that this whole world was fucked, right?
And then we meet the rest of the family, which is, there's that big guy with the heavy apron, the shy pregnant girl, a couple more beefy brothers, and we can't forget the scummy Nazi father.
Yes. Ugh.
What? Jeez. And the cannibalism in that film was when we do meet their one friend that was captured. He's hanging upside down with his hooks in his feet.
Yeah.
That was quite a painful kind of scene.
And seeing the best case scenario, you mentioned the pregnant woman that was with the family. She sort of represented the best case scenario. Like, if they decide that they like you and you play ball, you could just live with us.
Yep, she was taken as a child.
Yeah. You're going to have to sire a bunch of these, subhuman creatures, and you're going to have to eat, human meat, but you'll be alive. So, aim for that.
There was a scene in this movie that's reminiscent of a memorable scene in Misery, where they kind of cripple you so you can't leave.
They clip the Achilles tendon on the back of your heel
with bolt cutters.
Oh.
And I think that may have one-upped Kathy Bates. I think just watching that, it was just. But the strange thing about that scene is, one scene later, they just shot that guy in the head.
Yeah.
So the only reason really to cut the ankle was to make the audience say "ew,"
and we did.
Yeah, I said "ew." There's several times in this film where you say "ew."
Here's a good tip: if you're running from a bunch of Nazi cannibals, don't hide in an industrial oven.
Good tip. Words to live by.
That was another one of those kills, but by the time that guy was finally killed, you're like, thank you, Jesus.
Shoot him. His face is all melted off.
He's melting. Looks like a melted candle, and he's still somehow alive. And he just, oh my God.
At a certain point, the mood kind of changes. So the film, after all her friends are dead, and she's the last one left, they say, we're going to keep you, and you're going to become the wife to my favorite son.
Good deal.
Yeah, or to be the wife of the only son I'm proud of.
Right.
That's how he refers to him. And again, we get a weird dinner scene.
Yep.
Which is sort of becoming a theme with this kind of movie, it seems. But we do get the weird dinner scene, followed by a final chase with the final girl in the tunnels, where she becomes Ash a little bit. There's a scene where she throws a guy on a table saw, blood spraying in her face, and it's a very Evil Dead Ash moment.
But it's tonally adjacent from what became before, right? It does seem like it belongs in a different movie almost.
Sure. I mean, the violence is there. I mean, she takes a beating. Especially in her head. She's punched in the head, kicked in the head, thrown on, stepped on her head, and belted with a gun handle repeatedly. And she goes Rick Grimes on that one guy and bites his throat out. And if you like the grisly violence, then you're going to enjoy this film. But it's grisly, for sure.
It earns its reputation that way. I do think, I agree with that. In the end, I think that maybe to answer your question of the earlier part of the review about why they spent so much time at the beginning was to try and top load it with a little bit more like there's more stakes to the world outside, so that when we come into this world, like it doesn't feel like you were saying, if it was just a group of teenagers who had car trouble. We've seen this movie before, but they're chased into this corner by the chaos of the world that they're already in. But there's no payoff to that. It does. Sort of like the absurdity became an extra layer of paint on the torture in the ordeal. I think that this bigger world, this political uprising, was just another layer of paint that, in the end of the day, really didn't have much function to the movie. It kept the pace strong, which I appreciated. But I think at the end of the day, it is another torture movie. It is another movie about a bunch of people who go somewhere they shouldn't, and bad shit happens. Because it's part of the French extreme, the level of blood and gore is pretty severe, and because they established that the main character is pregnant, just watching her getting beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten throughout the movie, just it gets hard to take,
Yeah, that kid's not going to turn out that well.
or is she going to have any brain cells to rub together to raise this kid? Is she just going to be drooling in a chair? It's ugly, but and it's well made. Like, I do think this director, I will keep an eye on him, and I really liked The Divide. As ugly as it was, I really liked The Divide. So I certainly, definitely keep an eye on this guy. But in the end of the day, I think it's just another torture porn movie. It's pretty well made. But it is what it is after a point for me.
Okay.
In a way, it's taken the place that Wolf Creek had for me. It's like, that was unpleasant. That's my takeaway.
I think the difference from the unpleasantness is it doesn't feel real.
Right.
At the same time, whereas the lingering shots in I Spit on Your Grave, for example, they just feel uncomfortable.
Right.
There's some scenes in Frontier where they're so over the top, where it's like, well, this is
almost absurd. Yeah.
Yeah. But I can see what you're saying too.
Is there anything else you want to say about Frontiers? I kind of feel like I did short shift on it. It's not a bad movie. Again, it's an is what it is movie. If you want to watch something fucking hard that lives up to the French extreme, yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of those. I in its own way, I think that The Martyrs and The Inside, even though they're so grueling, they got a little bit more going on. That's all.
Okay, fair enough.
Good enough?
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Rank and Review, Scott. I appreciate you doing this. I don't appreciate watching all of these absolutely ugly movies in a short period of time. It did put a bit of a fog over me for a little while.
Yeah.
To watch
I watched these 6 movies in 6 days, so it was an ugly week.
I had to watch some Simpsons to as an antidote, and throw some Rick and Morty on or something that I can laugh and pretend that the world is not this terrible, terrible place.
Yeah, I think after I was finished the 6th one, I watched Endgame after, just for something cheerful.
That was actually light and better, yeah. Well, I think we're probably going to agree on the bottom, but that's about the only thing that I feel confident on. What was your least favorite of these 6 torture porn movies and why?
Okay. Well, number 6, I Spit on Your Grave just belongs at number 6. I feel like I would be a bad person if you put it any higher, almost. It's basically a gritty grindhouse exploitation horror film, and it's of its time period. I think it's maybe got the reputation it has because of when it was made. If it was made now, it would be just dismissed as trash, I think.
I hope.
We didn't really talk about the performances in the movie, which are not strong.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. If you're a horror fan, you know of the film, and if you want to check it out for yourself, feel free, but you kind of know the movie.
I do think it's skippable. I understand why people remember the movie. I understand why it's sort of stuck in the craw of the culture, but I don't think it's an essential horror movie. I just don't.
No. At 5th place, I'm going to put I'm putting Calvaire, The Ordeal. Like I said, when it was over, I honestly didn't think I liked it. Mostly due to the ending, the final 15 minutes. I took the disc out and I thought, I'm not going to watch this again. And I thought, I wonder how much I could sell it for. And the next day, it's all I could think about. And I thought, this was maybe not as bad. That dancing alone brings it up to at least number 5. I'd almost be interested in possibly a remake of this film.
Oh, really?
just because there's some interesting ideas, if maybe they could just expand on it a bit with the villagers and maybe clean it up, because it's some scenes are pretty dark and hard to really see.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know. I'd be interested in that maybe, but as it stands here, I can't put it any higher than 5th.
Okay.
I'm going to put Hostel 2 at number 4. It hits all the Eli Roth buttons.
Yep.
There's some pretty cool. There's some pretty, if you like seeing bad things happen to people, they have that happening. And it's fairly light considering the subject matter. So, so there it is.
So
I think the dumb as hell ending, final few minutes, limits me from putting it any higher than 4th, though.
It was a distasteful way to hit the credits, wasn't it?
What's that?
It was kind of a distasteful way to hit the credits.
I found, yeah. Now, 2 and 3 were the tough ones for me. And they flip-flopped a lot. Last night, I just sat here looking at this stack of movies saying, is this really how I'm going to put them? And in the end, I changed it last minute. So I'm going to stick with this. Number 3, I put Saw 2. I don't know. I was going to put it higher at number 2, and I thought, can I really put a Saw sequel that high in the list? And I didn't know. It's the best of the franchise, I think. It can stand on its own even as a movie. I don't think you need to see the first one necessarily even.
That's true. It does hold its own.
I don't think it's necessarily a scary horror film like any of the Saw movies really, because it's kind of a random collection of people put in a room and they've got backstories. Maybe they're not all likable even, but it's interesting. It was a good movie.
All right.
And Wolf Creek at number 2, it's because it gives us those characters that you care about, which none of the other movies really had the same sort of thing. So with that, I became worried about them. I felt their terror. Great camera work, the mystery of the crater itself, everything kind of drew me into it an hour before it even got horrific. It's not a perfect movie. Like I said, I flip-flopped between that and Saw 2, but I don't know. I guess it's at times I feel like maybe it's not a complete movie even.
Right.
But because we miss a lot of what happens, but I'm going to go with this ranking at Wolf Creek at number 2, and I know we're not going to match because I loved Frontier.
Nice. I'm glad. I'm glad, man.
It was my kind of that type of film. I enjoyed the special effects were good. It's not perfect. Like I said, I was kind of curious about why these characters were what they were. If we would have had the Wolf Creek characters come into this situation, would we care a little bit more about them? Perhaps.
Maybe.
I don't know. But I enjoyed it. It was. It's not a cheerful film, but it's. I liked it.
Nice.
Number 1 for.
Look, dude, I'm glad that you liked Frontiers. In the end, I might have been harder on it. It was part of it is just trying to make sense of the list, I guess. And I could have a Wolf Creek reaction. You know, if I watch Frontiers in a few years again, I might see a lot more to it. I also wonder, you know, it was the last one that I watched. Or no, it was the second last one that I watched. I watched Saw 2 last. You know, if I was just starting to get worn out, you know, I don't think it's an awful movie. It just didn't make as big an impression on me, obviously, as it did on you. But for sure, check out.
I saved that one for last. I hadn't seen it before, and I was really looking forward to that one. So I thought I was going to build to it, and I had this fear that it was going to let me down.
Then it didn't.
No, I was right into it. Like I said, it finished, and I hadn't written anything down. I was just kind of glued to the film. So
always a good sign. You're right. We don't have a very similar list at all, but I don't think we're going to fight too much about it. I'm sorry how low Frontiers ranks on the list, but it's just the way I felt. We're going to start an agreement, though, easily, comfortably, with no real competition. I Spit on Your Grave is in last place. It's like it embarrasses me a little bit that it's on my wall. To be honest, yeah. That's how distasteful I find the film.
My wife came down to say goodnight to me the night I was watching it.
Yeah.
And so she's not going to watch this with me. So she came down and she looked at me and she looked at the TV, and I could tell there was a little bit of judgment.
Yeah.
and a little bit of embarrassment for me. Like, yeah, I don't feel good about this.
Yeah. And again, like, we're pretty hard. You and I can watch some hard shit. And no, neither of us have anything good to say about I Spit on Your Grave. And anybody who spends their time defending this movie, I find it mystifying. Here's where I hurt your feelings, though. All the way in 5th place, I put Frontiers, which is what you put in first. I thought that a lot of the technical filmmaking I liked, although it is guilty a little bit of shaky cam. Some of the chaos gets a little bit hard to follow at times, but it's all feeding into that experience, the feelings that they're trying to get to you. But beyond, the setup, it got really familiar to me. Like, there was an instability in that crazy family, a little bit of a people under the stairs vibe to the villains, which I can appreciate. But I don't know. It didn't stick with me in any other way, the way some of the other ones did. So in 4th place, I put The Ordeal, or CALVAIRE. And like I said in the review, I think the crazy kind of made it stick in my head more. You're right. The movie ends and you're like, what the fuck was that? But you can't shake it necessarily. You start thinking about those guys dancing in the bar, or that weird scene with the kid and the pig, and like, what was this? What was that movie? And because I couldn't let go of it, it sort of stuck in my throat a little bit. It edged up. So there it is. In 3rd place, I am putting HOSTEL Part 2. It overperformed for me. I mean, I want to be on board with Eli Roth and say that he deserves to be the new Crown Prince of Horror, but I don't know who that person is, but for some reason I'm resistant to the idea that it's Eli Roth. That said, I say good on him for making a sequel that, to my mind, is actually better than the original. I think, again, getting into the psychology of the people who are actually doing the torturing was a good move. Because we know not to get too attached to these, freewheeling American tourists, because it's not gonna work out for most of them, is it? So I think it was a new enough spin on it that points. And I'm putting another sequel in 2nd place, and it's weird for me to put Saw 2 so high on the list. And I think that there might be a contingency listening who might call bullshit in that this being included as a torture porn movie. Saw does have that stink on it. It does have that reputation. But the more I think about Saw and the more I watch them, the less I think maybe necessarily they earn the title.
Right.
It is an entertaining movie. It's got, a lot of characters, so a lot of bloodletting as a result. The twist is not yet getting super irritating because it's only the 2nd time that they've hit this. It works way better than you'd expect it to. So,
yeah, when you get down to part 5, part 6, you're like, okay, and the twist is...
Yeah, exactly. So, again, I don't want to oversell it. I'm not a huge Saw person generally, but there it sits on the list.
I had it at number 2 for a while, too.
And, again, I had this complete flip-flop on Wolf Creek. I originally just found it so unpleasant that I just had, who gets entertainment out of this? I don't get it, but... upon watching it again, and maybe because I'd seen it and knew what to expect, I could appreciate the thought and the filmmaking and the performances more than maybe I did on first pass. So I'm glad that I watched it again, and I surprised myself by putting it in first place. But if you want to watch something violent, ugly, and torturous, Wolf Creek is a pretty good example of that. So I'm putting it in first place. And that's my list.
That's a decent list. I can get behind that, I guess.
I guess. I promise you I will give Frontiers another day in court. This is how much I respect your taste in horror, brother.
It's got to be the right day.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
Well, so ends episode 149 of Rank and Review, brother.
Wow.
I believe that we had talked about perhaps a found footage episode in your future. Is that still something you're interested in?
Oh, for sure.
Nice. Until then, my friend. So we did it. We made it through that torture porn list, and I'm so happy that Scott wasn't like super into I Spit on Your Grave. Like, I've known Scott as long as I've been alive, and like, it would be really weird if he was like totally into a movie that absolutely kind of appalled me. I mean, I'm sure we would still walk away friends and everything like this, but I'm glad if we agreed nowhere else, I'm glad we agreed on I Spit on Your Grave. I hope I never am in a position to watch that movie again. Yuck. Anyway, next episode, I promise we're going to lighten up the proceedings. Big thanks to Scott Lehman. Always great to hear your voice, brother. Thank you for being here. Always a solid guest. You will hear him again. And please send me your feedback at ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. Please check out the website at ranknreview.ca. Please keep your ear to the ground for Book of Trespasses. We're still trying to get that movie out there. And if you're looking for another horror movie podcast, I could consider trying the Terror Table podcast because they know what they're doing. Please spread the word on Rank and Review, and we'll see you for the 150th episode.